So thank you all for coming. I know that some of you had quite the drive, so yeah. Thank you again. I'm Jess Colby. I'm the Riparian Lands Program Coordinator. Um,
My name's Jake Gellinger. I'm the Riparian Lands Program Assistant.
and we are here to talk about Riparian woody plant phenology for spring seed collection. I just wanted to welcome all to NorthWoods Stewardship Center. If you haven't been here before, we are a nonprofit that has a lot of different hands in a lot of different projects. We have 4 different departments here. We are both part of the Conservation Science Department, which is 2 different teams that kind of do very similar work. We are kind of more on the wildlife habitat side, but we also have our conservation services group that kind of works more on water quality. Don't make me laugh. Um, and then we also have a forestry department here that works on really helping landowners manage their forest properly with stewardship in mind. They host a lot of events and they host things like game of logging and habitat walks and all of that fun stuff. We also have our demonstration forest here that is kind of open for research, and we've been doing some work with climate adaptation studies here. We also have our education department here that works with our local youth and really works to engage students with the outdoors and getting them to have that sense of stewardship. And then we also have our core department that really works on our recreation aspect of maintaining trails and making sure that they're not just going straight up mountains and things like that. And the Corps has a bunch of programs all throughout New England. So we have core programs all the way down Long Island Sound and all the way up in Maine. And we also have crews here that are based here at Northwoods. So uh, lots of outreach here. Um, yeah. So that's just Northwoods in a nutshell. And now I will get us started. So just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement that Northwood Stewardship Center respectfully acknowledges that we are on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Abenaki people, the first people of this land. The Clyde River Valley, where Northwoods is located, was and remains an important link between Memphremagog and the upper Connecticut River watersheds. Indigenous people from many nations live and work here today. We recognize that acknowledgement is just the beginning of recognizing the history and future of Indigenous people on this land. Please join us in honoring their communities, their elders, past and present, and future generations. So, what does the Riparian Lands do? We collect, process, store native tree and shrub seeds for restoration. We do this by mapping seed source locations and phenology data, and we work closely with local conservation nurseries. Many of you are here today. Um, Direct seeding trials with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, and starting this year, we are also working with a few other groups, including the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then this year, we are also working a little bit more to do some more outreach and education. This is one of our events. So thank you for joining us. So how did we get here? So starting in 2015, decade ago, cornfield replication experiments began by Fish and Wildlife, the Connecticut River Conservancy, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And those started at Willoughby Falls WMA, which is located in Orleans, Vermont, about half an hour from here. Fast forward to 2019, we had the La Platte Headwaters Town Forest, which is over in Heinsberg, Vermont. They started a direct seeding experiment, and that was a partnership with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Intermill Center in Burlington, TNC, and several others. By 2020, that's when COVID hit, obviously. And it really showcased that we needed to put more of an effort into seed collection because the previous experiments weren't quite working out. And that's when I was hired on as the riparian lands coordinator. 2021, that was the first year that I started doing seed collection. And I had a spraying seed crew. And we were kind of given the objective to go out and cut seeds. Blanket statement. Didn't know what I was really collecting for. 2022, that was when I had my first long season crew. They started in March, they ended in November, and that was the first year that we really dedicated any time towards scouting. So we were just like driving around all day, looking at all the trees and shrubs that we were on our target list, and really trying to figure out what the phenology timeline was. Uh, 2023 is when Jake joined me. Um, and that was also the first year that the Interville Center hired a seed coordinator. So there was more of a concerted effort statewide to like figure out what's going on with the phenology of all these species and figuring out how to collect them and process them and store them properly. Last year was the first year that Interville Center had a spring seed crew, and then that was the second year or the third year that I had a riparian lands long season crew. Jake returned, which was great. And now that brings us to now. Jake came back as my program assistant. We kind of did away with the crew, but we're focusing more on splitting all of the tasks that I was doing between myself and Jake, and working more on outreach and getting people out in the field and learning how to do this, so that we can expand our capacity in that way. And the ICN, the Intervale crew, also came back for the spring season. So, feeling pretty good about that. So just to give you a little overview of the different sites that we did our direct seeding, all of the yellow ones are previous direct seeding sites. And as you can see, they're kind of statewide. And the only ones that Jake and I have actually done any like physical seeding are all the ones that are up here in the kingdom. So Johnson Farms up in Canaan, the Valley Brook Stream Bank Management Area in Oregon, and then the Upper Lamoille River Access Area in Wolcott. So those were the three that we did. Of course, the last 2 years we had floods. And so we had thrown out these seeds onto the sites, hoping that they would regenerate. And then a flood happened and got rid of all of our seeds. So we really haven't seen great results as of yet. This year, we're planning on having 2 more sites in different soil conditions. So the previous ones, they were all reed, canary grass, bulk agricultural hayfields. And this one, these upcoming 2 are old cornfields, bringing us back to the cornfield replication project. So we're hoping that by hitting bare soil, old cornfields, burning our seeds out, they will regenerate very quickly and we will have many trees. So why do we do direct seeding? Like I said, we're really trying to get really high regeneration on these sites. And it was really started after all of the tropical storms and hurricanes that kind of hit in 2011 and 2012. We saw massive devastation, kind of like what you are seeing the past 2 years. And what the state was seeing is in these old hayfields, old cornfields, after all that devastation, seeds would fall on these sites and then regeneration would occur. So this is like one of the sites that they saw it on. It's like kind of not any trees. And then within 3 years, they're taller than you or I. And so that's what we're trying to aim for, instead of just typical tree planting. So these are some of our partners. We work really closely with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Nature Conservancy, the Interville Center, Connecticut River Conservancy, and most of this work has been funded through the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. So that's our Riparian Lands Native Seed Partnership. And then these are our seed collection folks. Got Brooke Fleischman, who's over at the Intervale Center, myself as the Riparian Lands Program Coordinator, and then our two spring crew members over at Intervale is Reese and Maddie. We got Jake, and then we got Gabby, who are working here at NorthWoods. There you go, Jake.
Yeah, sure. So when we're out like looking for doing scouting, looking for sites, looking for species, um these are kind of what we're interested in. A lot of species that are maybe fast growing, a lot of species that are really like water tolerant, flood tolerant, species that are good at drinking enough water. So we have a ton of these spread out amongst like kind of some more like spring ones like the cottonwood, some like fall ones like the birches, summer ones like the dogwood. We're out looking for these species mostly. And then we have kind of our like opportunistic list of species if we see them. We did a little bit of black ash collection last year with Intervale Center. That was really great where I was on the lookout for healthy butternuts and um, silky dogwoods if we can find them. Mhm. And this is our because this is our spring phenology workshop. These are our kind of like spring phenology calendar. You might notice that almost everything is flowering right here in the month of April. If you haven't gotten a chance to look over there, I collected a bunch of flowers today from the Northeast Kingdom. Um, yeah, you can see that a lot of stuff's flowering now, and then right at the beginning of May, like the first week of May, we'll start seeing actual seeds on the ground, and we'll need to be kind of there on the ground to collect them. A lot of these are pretty ephemeral, like they'll be gone pretty soon, which is why we spend a lot of time scouting and a lot of time kind of focusing on this collection effort. It can be kind of gone in a day if you don't catch it at the right time, so we're always vigilant. This is how we prep for scouting. So we kind of decide on what we're looking for. I mean, different things we look for have different sites. When we look at like things like cedars, we're looking for really like swampy cedar swamps. When we're looking at like aspen, we might be looking at like old hayfields or like good forest edge habitat. So we got as we focus on our species, and then we decide on our timeline. So when is the best time to scout for it? Preferably, as it's flowering or before it starts seeding is usually ideal, depending on the species. For our spring species, definitely, it's a must. Is it monoecious or dioecious? Meaning, um, is the tree we're looking at and spending all of our time looking at a male and it's not going to produce any seeds? Or are we good on that front? Um, how often is scouting needed for a species? Like, do you have enough time to track the changes enough? Um, yep. Um, identify potential locations. So we do this in a number of ways. Myself and Alex, who was a previous Riparian Lands member, we would do some like GIS mapping of certain areas using like atlases. We would also ask people, check in with like landowners if we see stuff on like rail trails or something. We'll reach out to the municipality that owns that. But a lot of our work is done on state lands. Um, and then another thing, which is kind of like gravy on top, we find similar sites in close proximity so that in the same day we can hit a number of sites and we're not, jumping between Burlington and Newport to try to get our seeds. And this is just some stuff we bring just for scouting, some binoculars and a camera. We like to track our phrenology. We have like more pictures than you can shake a stick at. Um, and then a notebook. And these are all things that we take out with us like every day when we go out, regardless of if we're collecting or not. We do have a survey 123 form. You all can help us scout. We have, I think they're over on the other table. Jess put together this awesome step-by-step guide on how to access that and how to use it. You can also use this QR code if you're interested. But please grab a hand up before you leave. Jess did a really good job of breaking it down step by step and how you can use it and how you can help us do our work. Here's our map we have. It looks a little overwhelming, but we have all kinds of the Interval Center was helpful enough to like really help us get this going and help us like update it. But we have anything you see here that's a dot on the map, that's a species that we've marked as potential for collection. Any of these ones with the blue halo, those are ones we've actively collected from. And they're also broken up by shape. Some of these are triangles, some of them are squares, some of them are circles, and that just determines like what time of year they're seeding. So like spring, summer, fall. And as you can see, like we've hit the Northeast Kingdom pretty heavily because Jess has been doing this since 2021. You can see the Intervale Center over in Burlington is doing a great job too of up there. And they're also, we've been recently trying to work our way down and kind of fill in this area down here. And we've been doing a pretty good job so far.
I will say that the survey 123, it connects to this. So any coins that you all add through the survey 123 code, it adds right to our map. So if you're adding to that, you are also helping us fill in this beautiful map.
And your point might be up there on this presentation a year from now. Great. And then Bavarians, native stewardship, the collaboration with Vermont Center Eco Studies. Any phenology annotations to old points. Oh yeah, these are all ways that you can help us via like iNaturalist and this QR code. So like it really does help to have annotations because things like the flowers we're looking at are so ephemeral. Like it helps to know when people are seeing them like year by year, so we can kind of predict when we're gonna find them. It kind of stinks to go out to a site and everything's already gone because we're like a day or two late. So any notes are super helpful. New points that include a lot of data, like if the species is like, or if the tree is like super accessible, stuff like that. Um, and then natural areas are preferred, but all data is helpful. We have permits to collect on state land, but we can also reach out to landowners and talk with them too. Here's our species overviews. So we're gonna go through and do some like species identification and also like kind of where we get our like resources from and how we kind of learn how to identify species. Cool. So a lot of these are like super great guides. This woody plants of the northern forest. We have some copies of all these over here and this big poster on the front table. This is like super good guide. Tons of good like leaf and bud photos, especially for like right now. The bud photos are really helpful. Sibley Guide to Trees. We use VTree. I've just discovered this recently, just put me onto it. It's like an incredible resource. It's super good. It's on your phone. It's from the Virginia Tech Dendrology Department. Super good resource. It's really has a lot of information. And it tells you things that are like in your location and if they're introduced and stuff like that. All kinds of information. And then we also love to use Seek. We did want to put a caveat for Seek that sometimes because it uses data from iNaturalist to try to guess what species you kind of just like show your camera on it and it tries to guess what species. It's not always accurate. It's pretty good. But especially for tree species, it has a tough time telling them apart. So just wanted to put a caveat. If you identify something with Seek, I would double check it. But it is a really great resource and it will definitely send you in the right direction if it doesn't think that your tree is a parrot or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say it works relatively well if you have flowers or leaves right there. Like the buds and the bark, it has no idea. It's just like Jake said. It will be like you're looking at an insect or dicot.
Even
That
oh, Dithot's a super helpful one.
it's like they you know that.
Cool. So this is our first species. And this is also kind of like chronologically our first species. This is our quaking aspen. This is a dioecious tree. It's wind dispersed. We'll see some fluff later on. That's how it spreads its seeds. And it'll start fluffing in mid-May or like early to mid-May. Honestly, like we've seen it in the first week before start to fluff. Depending on if it's a
Usually on the other side of the state though.
oh, I guess that's true. Yeah, we do have kind of a differentiation between Burlington and here. Um, By quaking aspen, it's super. We see this all the time around here. There's a great site up in Derby that we look at all the time. I got some of those from today. Um, yeah, and this is how we ID it. It has this like circular, like kind of rounded tooth leaf, 1 to 3 inches long. It's an alternate. If you're looking at the leafing pattern, um, heart shaped and nearly round with frayed tooth margins. The petiole is flattened. That's what gives it the quaking in the wind kind of effect. The bud is like scaled, conical, slightly resinous, not as much so as some of the other poplars, but pretty identifiable, I would say. Um, and the bark is cool, very interesting. Does this thing where it's really like smooth, almost like elephant skinny at first. And then as it kind of grows up and develops, it starts to like furrow and crack a little bit and create these interesting little divots in the bark. Um, and super like light in color. You'll see it in the forest. You may mistake it for a paper birch or something. And the growth form is it's relatively small as far as our species are concerned. Again, it kind of grows up as our like primary successional species on those like hayfield edges or like freshly, I don't know, disturbed sites is a good way to put it. And they are really clonal. Like a lot of the ones we see in like stands are maybe all the same organism in a way. Um, because it is pretty easy for them to shoot up clonally through these like root suckers through their roots like shoot up new sprouts. Yep.
Sorry. Do you see a lot of like natural hybridization in these species in like the, like uh the aspens and stuff like that, or is that not so common?
I have I haven't found it very common, at least up here. It seems like everything is pretty good. Pretty good. We see it in the willows. The willows will hybridize pretty readily, but at least for this species, we're pretty good.
Cool. These are our male flowers. Again, the species is dioecious, so they have both a male and a female individual. Um, And so you can see on the flowers, these are these like anther structures. So that's where all the pollen comes out. They kind of from a distance, they look very similar to the like early female flowers, but as soon as they start to lose that fluff, I mean, they'll fall off really soon. These are pretty ephemeral, will only last for like a week or so. Um, but they're really pretty, this like bright red color, but usually like kind of caked in this like fuzzy material at the start. And this is what they look like after, a little bit of time and a little bit of pollen gone out.
Yeah, and I don't know if y'all can see this. This one was taken last year on April 9th here in Derby, and this was taken on April 22nd over in Burlington area. So it's just showing you a little bit of a time gap. And like Jake said, these ones fall off pretty quickly, and I noticed like this morning, my car was absolutely covered in these. So they're falling off now.
Yeah, and it's easy to tell these apart. Well, it's not easy to tell them apart from the females, but one thing you can look at is like if it's super wispy and like just looks like it doesn't have any structure to it, there's a good chance that it's a male flower that's already like produced some pollen. And these are our female flowers. These are actually more like they're like pre-seeds. Well, this is a good flower example. Um, you can see they almost have. I mean, you can see this is the whole flower structure. It's just this like ovary system right here, with little like petals on the top, kind of cute. Um, and those will catch all the pollen from the males and then kind of turn into these are like pod structures. Um, they kind of look like elf boots almost. Um, that's a good way to think of them. Um, and we'll start to see these pretty soon within the next like couple weeks.
And are these from the same site? They're both from Derby.
Yeah, they must be. Mhm.
So, the one that still has kind of the flowery structure to it was taken at the end of April of last year, April 25th, and then this was taken last year at on May 13th. So not even is that like a week and a half, maybe
Yeah,
3 weeks
2 weeks.
difference. Is how quickly things change, which is why we're out scouting quite a bit.
Yeah. And this is our seed dispersal. You can see little seeds trapped in this fluffy material. Um and they just get launched by the wind. And in fact, they're kind of activated by the wind. Once they get to be like a really like big pod, a hot and windy day will cause them to like all go at once. Which is also important for us to be out there as soon as it's happening because if you get there even a day late, it might all be gone. So these are again our super ephemeral species, but there's a ton of them. Like you can see all of these seeds all coming from this one pod structure. We get, tons of these, like millions of these seeds a year, for our projects, which is really great. Our next species on our list, we don't get quite as many of these ones, but our American elm, which is a species of concern, which we really like to look for. It's a monoecious tree, meaning there's only one sex. It is also wind dispersed. You can see that the samaras have this little like almost UFO structure of like seed in the middle and like samara around the edge, and that'll help it get picked up by the wind. Um, and that'll be like late May. It almost always goes on Memorial Day, like without fail, every single year. So that's a good like indicator. If you're having fun on Memorial Day weekend, you can be on the lookout. The leaves are really interesting. They have these like lopsided leaves where it's there's more leaf on one side than the other. Or they're at least like at the petiole, it's kind of like off center. So I feel like that's a pretty good characteristic for just looking at them. They're rough to the touch. They have these like super like defined teeth. And obviously pretty big teeth. And the leaves are pretty big too. I don't have a size comparison, but I don't know, maybe like 5 to 6 inches they can get up to. Um, the buds are these like round brownish ones with some scaling. Um, and then the bark is really like furrowed, this like brownish gray color, alternating lights and darks, and flattened ridges on the bark that are straight on younger trees and braided on older trees. Yeah, and you'll see it. And even too, it'll get to the point where the bark is kind of almost like peely because it is getting so like furrowed and the ridges are getting so deep. And then I feel like growth form is probably our biggest way that we can identify the species in the field. It like almost always forms this cool vase structure. Um, Upper trunk system is straightened. Yeah. Um, and it has branches and twigs that droop. So it kind of like goes up and then it's almost like firework. It like goes up, spreads out, and then comes down. And we see this all the time along like rivers in Vermont, like along the Connecticut especially. Really great species.
I wanted to throw out another way of identifying it is this comes from Brooke Fleischman. She equates it to like fish scale, not scales, like fish bones. So before the leaves come out, the branches kind of look like the skeleton of a fish. Like they kind of look like that. We should have had a photo of that because that would have made it really
Yeah.
easy to tell. But
Well, that's a good point to bring up too, because another thing that we look for with elms when we're like looking for them in the field is they're kind of the last thing to leaf out. So if you're seeing like a forest with all of its leaves on and you see one tree that maybe looks dead, it might just be an elm that hasn't quite leafed out yet. So that's another key indicator we look for. Here are flowers, very pretty, perfect flowers, perfect in all sense of the word. They have these, yeah, like anthers coming off. They're very like frilly and puffy. You'll see them like drooping from the trees. And they do have this like pretty red color, almost like maroony. And then this is kind of like our like pre-seed. You can see the like starts of the samara start to form right here. Even while the anthers are still like on this flower. Really cool. And it'll just kind of get bigger than this for the next month or so. This was taken on 4/23. For over the course of the next month, it'll kind of just grow in size until it's ready to fall off. Yeah, these are seed developments. This is from again like 4/28. These are different years, but you get the picture. We start off with this kind of like small underdeveloped seed that's like still has a lot of this kind of like sepal material almost right here. And then over the course of the month, it'll grow and develop into these really like defined seeds with this cool fuzzy like samara edge that'll get like easily picked up by the wind and sent into our rivers. Our next species we're looking at is shrub willow. We say shrub willow. We are getting better. One of our goals this year is to get better at identifying different willow species. We have the big ones down, and now we're trying to work on differentiating between willow species before we had kind of lumped them all into one big group, since they have kind of similar site characteristics and similar growth patterns and stuff. But this year we're trying to be a lot better about differentiating those. I believe this is a bed's willow. Yeah. And these are also dioecious. A lot of our species in Salicaceae will be dioecious, our like aspens and our willows. They're wind dispersed as well. They form these pods, which will form this fuzzy material. And then because there are so many species within this, they kind of do, most of them will fluff out between May and June, although some of them will wait until the fall. And for identification, I know this looks like a lot, but it's just because we kind of lump a lot of species together for this because they fill similar like roles, similar like ecosystem functions. So we have these like generally untoothed leaves, or like maybe like slightly toothed, and generally these kind of like lancelet leaves. Some of them more oval, like so it's discolor. The pussy willow is more like kind of a pill shaped. But then you get down to like South Niagara or black willow. It's not sharp willow, but is like super like sharp. Or interior, I think, is a sandbar willow. That one's also super like skinny and sharp. Bud, single bud scale. Yeah, there is a lot of differentiation between these, but a lot of them are like really close to the really close, like up against the twig. And generally pretty like slender, I feel like is a good descriptor. Bark on young shrubs is like smooth, generally like gray in color, like similar to like a red maple almost, like a young red maple. And then can come in a variety of colors, but again, mostly that like brown, that like grayish, reddish, brownish. And then the mature barks or the mature shrub will start to get like textured bark. We'll see like some furrows, kind of like on like on a bigger willow. And then for growth form, a lot of them are this just kind of like multi-stemmed bush that can get 10 to 20 feet tall, maybe 20 in our like pussy willows that we're looking at, our Salix discolor. And they are adaptable to a variety of site conditions. Some of them like to live right on the sandbar. Some of them prefer kind of these like ag field sites. Like some of them will live in like roadside ditches. Some of them don't like that. So there is a variety, and that's also part of the reason we're trying to differentiate between them this year. Be better about site selection.
When you're differentiating between the species, what is like your, like when we look at the leaves, I feel like the leaves have so much variation. Is there like like buds, leaves, flowers? Is there something that you use more often than not for identification?
We are this year leaning pretty heavily on the Northern Forest Atlas, which has leaves and buds. So you're like comparing those while out in the field. Like Jake said, we tend to group all of our shrub willow together because that's kind of how all the nurseries do it. So we're just out there collecting for those purposes. There really hasn't been a push to differentiate all the shrub willows. This is kind of just us being out here being like, we want to learn the shrub willows and try to be better about differentiating, especially since I do hybridize so readily. So we're going to see if we can do it.
Yeah. I always say too, there are some similarities, or these some things you can kind of like dichotomous key out. Some of them will have like white on the underneath is a pretty like common thing, or like dark on the underneath. Those are kind of like two different ones. Some of them will be like fuzzy when mature. Some of them will not be fuzzy. Some of them will be like glossy on top. There'll be like different colorations.
Stipules.
Oh yeah, persistent stipules. That's something we see on like South's Eriocephala or like heart-shaped willow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot of just like looking at the whole plant and not necessarily relying on one characteristic. And we're trying to see how it works.
Yep. Yeah. We're trying this year. Putting this together, we had a hard time differentiating them. But they all typically have like similar flower structures. This is our male flowers. You might see this in like a store or something. Very like pretty when it first starts out in like mid April. But then by like close to the end of April, we'll see these like male flowers with all this like pollen ready to disperse. We'll see some of these like shriveled male flowers that have already kind of come and gone. Or like parts of this male flower, I should say. Yeah, and again, we have the flower is like very simple in structure. It's kind of just like this one like or couple anthers and yeah, along the same little, I don't even know if it's called a raceme. It's all like on flower, but and then these are our female flowers. Again, it's kind of similar to the quaking aspen. We have kind of just one structure that's like all pistil with these little like petals, two little petals on top. And this is all one flower along one kind of central stalk. And you can see the kind of like progression of it. From the beginning of April, they kind of still have all of their petals. By mid-April, they're starting to like lose those, and by the end of April, they're kind of like almost are like pre-seed stage. They're like almost ready to be like sending out fluff. Not quite, but they're getting there. And these are their pods. These are like fully mature, like ready to burst almost. Um, and we see like two different species here. And we have some of them, they come in a variety of like colors and shapes. Some of them are kind of more stout. Some of them are like long and spread out. Some of them are like bright red in color. Some of them are like more green. Some of them are like kind of a light like lime green, and some of them are more like dark. And there's a ton of variety, and there's a ton of yeah, like different colors and stuff that can come in shapes and sizes. Um, Here we have their like seed dispersal mechanism, very similar to the quaking aspen. Although these seeds are actually like even smaller than that, if you can believe it. You can see them all suspended in here. And um Again, like, because it is another like fluffy species, it will kind of come and go extremely quickly. I was out here this day on the North Troy site, and we were just watching them all get taken by the wind as we were like racing to throw them in our bags. But again, shrub willows are really great because they tend to form these like huge, not colonies in the sense of like clonal organisms, but like huge like hedgerows of shrub willow, which are really great, like super low to the ground, easy to collect from. um yeah, fun to pick off. It's kind of like picking peas.
All right.
So
Yeah.
I should about so all the things that disperse with wind and they come in fluff. Sometimes I wonder um when I should be picking it up off the ground and when I shouldn't be. And I've been using just moisture as my guiding practice. I don't know if you have other things to recommend.
Yeah. So we tend to clip them just before they are fully like sending out fluff. Like we want them still on the tree,
Yeah.
still on the shrubs themselves. And they're just barely starting to open up. Fluff is just starting to pop out. What we do is we collect them, we bring them back, and then we have those screens which are on the floor over there. We put them out in a nice thin layer in there. And we have fans just blowing on them. So it's kind of more of a controlled setting for us to release the fluff into. The fluff still gets everywhere and it's fun. But we can capture more of the seeds that way. We generally don't collect off the ground unless we know that it was like it just barely fell. But yeah, that's anything else?
Yeah, just for I mean, if you want to go back a slide, I feel like this is like a pretty good indicator. Like you can see that some of the ones on this tree are like already like really going. Some of them are just starting to go. Some of them haven't gone yet. This is like kind of what we look for, maybe even a little bit before this, where we can see some of them splitting open and some of them not. That's when we tend to collect. We can tell by the way that they're splitting open that they're probably mature enough to be successful, but they're not off the tree yet physically. So
We also like when they're at this stage, we can open up some pods that haven't fully and look at them and make sure that they're not just pre-emerging because of insects or some other variable, because that can also trigger them to release their fluff early. But we're just making sure that the seeds inside look solid; they're not translucent anymore. Um, it's really nice to have a little hand lens when you're doing it for these like strobilo, because the seeds are really tiny. But yeah. All right. So the next species that we really focus on following shrub willow. Shrub willow kind of keeps going, but this is the next one that is kind of happening at the end of May. Is silver maple, and it can be either dioecious or monoecious. So you'll see trees that are mostly male or mostly female. You'll also find little clusters that have both male and female trees or flowers on them. Um, and they're both wind and water dispersed. And like I said, this is happening late May, early June. So the way that you can identify silver maple is one by their leaves. They are deeply sinus. They're generally 5-lobed, and they're very light on the underside, hence the name silver maple. Their buds and flowers are like red maple, but they tend to be a little bit earlier and they tend to be a little bit round. And they're rounded and they're clustered at the end of the twigs. The bark forms strips that come up at the ends, and like most trees, they're smooth when they're young, and then they get more furrowed and weathered as they get older. And then the growth form is they tend to have multiple form like trunks coming out from the base, and they tend to kind of grow up and out, um, so that their branches are kind of hanging down, which you can kind of see here where they grow out and then they start drooping. Um, so that's kind of a good growth form characteristic.
Yeah, silver maples are really good at splitting apart. That's kind of what they like to do, is like break away in like storm events and stuff. So they're super like always trying to kind of stretch the possibility of structure whenever they're growing.
So these are the male flowers. So the one on the left was taken up in Canaan on April 10th of last year. As you can see, like the really filamenty flowers being in full bloom. And then this is a photo that I took, Alex took last year in Derby. So there was a little bit of a delay here. So they're a day apart, but that one looks a little bit less along than the one in Derby, which kind of tracks. We seem to think that the ones in Derby end up being a little bit further along than a lot of our other sites, probably because of the lake. Um, but yeah, so that's male flowers. They're more yellow too. That's kind of a good indicator as you're looking from afar. And then our female flowers, they tend to be more red. This one was a interesting one that we found this year when we were down in Rockingham. Um, the the female flowers tend to they look a little less vibrant than we are used to seeing. They're usually like really, really dark red. And they kind of look like alien tentacles that are coming out um, of the flower. So, and then this is what the male and female flowers kind of look like on a tree. These are both from the Intervale Center, and they were taken last year on April 10th. And so you can see this is the female flower, and then these are the male flowers, and they're all on the same cluster. And then same here, male flower, female flower. So, and then as those seeds start to take form, you'll start to see the little samaras growing. Tends to happen pretty quickly because those flowers were forming in middle of April. By the first week of May, you should be starting to see some samaras. And then they just continue to grow. They get pretty large. I think these ones tend to be like 3 inches across at their peak growth. And like we said, around the end of May, they're pretty close. These ones are still pretty green. They start to turn brown as they get more to their maturity. Yeah. Like we said, they are dispersed by both water and wind. So I've seen many, many samaras on top of backwaters that were great for collection as long as you collected them right away. They do get waterlogged and they'll sink to the bottom. But if that water's moving, they will flow downstream and find a nice little sandbar to hopefully grow. But they will also fly in the wind because they're those big wide samaras that will just spin around out into open fields as well. And so our next species is red maple, and a lot of the timing is pretty close to the silver maples. Like I said, the silvers start to flower around the same time as like aspens, and then the red maple starts to be flowering like right now. if you drag around and you see the really bright, vibrant red on the hillsides, so those are most likely red maples. And like silvers, they can be either dioecious or monoecious. They're also wind and water dispersed, late May, early June. The big difference for IB is that it has 3 lobes. They're generally have shallow and sharp sinuses. They're that V-shaped instead of the U shape of sugar maple. And they're generally lightened on the underside. The bud is rounded, vibrant red, and the scales tend to have a light edge to them. The bark is smooth and gray when it's young, and then it breaks into scaly plates when it's older. The growth form is it has more structure than silver, so it grows straighter and it doesn't grow as far out as silver maples would. So as you can see here, it's pretty tight growth pattern straight up instead of that outward, downward growth pattern.
I will say, speaking of hybrids, silver maples and red maples are also close enough. They do hybridize. They produce something called a Freeman's maple, which is often planted on like fruit sides. It's a really nice fruit tree.
And so these are the flowers. So way over on the left side are male flowers. They're made of really bright red with the anthers sticking out. Then we've got our monoecious, which is both male and female. And you can see the anthers here and the pistils here. And then these are our female ones with the nice long pistils as well. And these ones they tend to be like really, really vibrant red compared to the silvers. Like these ones, you look at it and it's like almost pinkish red in my mind. Whereas like the silvers are that really dark maroonish red. So anything to add?
Yeah, it's like watermelon candy colored. It's like really, really vibrant, like way more so than the silver maples.
Again, the seed development. These are taken at the end of April. And then by the first week of May, that's when we start seeing the seeds forming. And then those start forming and they grow throughout the month of May. By the end of May, they're pretty well ready to start collected. And then we generally are collecting by the first week of June. And they start to turn tannish. So they start to lose the color, turn tan. And then at that point, that's when we're out collecting. And like we said before, they're both wind and water dispersed. We don't have a great photo of the water dispersal or a site where it's dispersed, but it's the same way that silver maple is. The samaras will float on the water until they get too waterlogged, then they'll sink. So if the water's moving, they ride the wave until they hit a spot where they sink and grow in the spot that it plants. And like any other samaras, they'll fly around in the air. So then at this point, we're coming into the first week of June. Balsam poplar is coming onto our minds. Like the other Salicaceae species that we talked about, they are dioecious, they're wind dispersed. We're generally collecting by the middle of June. Their leaves are heart-shaped, they're glossy, and they're dark green on the upper side, and they're kind of brownish on the underside. The buds are really long. They're about 1 inch long. They're resinous and they have like a really strong scent to them. The bark is greenish gray, smooth but textured once they get older. And the growth form, they can be up to 80 feet tall, but again, they're prone to cloning. So you'll find thickets of them because they're just root suckering along. These are the male flowers. They are bright red. This isn't the best photo that we have of it, but they tend to be, they're going about right now. Like I said, they're bright red. And then our female flowers, we have more photos of those. And they tend to be bright yellow, and they're really pretty when you're out there. Like I said, you get the fragrant buds, the bright yellow. Um, yeah, and those ones were taken at the end of April. So if you're out and about looking right now, you probably will find some female balsam poplar. And then by the first week of May, that's usually when you start to see that change from the flowers into the pod structures. And then through the month of May, they start getting bigger and bigger. We have a picture of Alex who is holding one that's like the length of her face down to her shoulder, which was a very long pod. um, but they will get bigger and bigger, and this is about when we're thinking about collection. And again, we're looking for the pods to start to burst and the fluff to start to emerge. Yeah.
Do they have another common name?
Uh, Probably the other one that you would be thinking of is balm of Gilead.
Oh,
That's the other name for them.
Or I've heard foresters called them popples before.
Popples.
Like your popple, that's generally what they're talking about, I think.
When foresters say it, they're also thinking like all of the
Yeah, it's like
species. But yeah, those are the two that come to mind. Yeah. And then Eastern cottonwood is also kind of going on at the same time. Again, dioecious, male, female trees. They're wind dispersed, and around mid-June is when we're collecting. The leaf is triangle shaped. They are rounded. They have rounded teeth. They're really big. The buds are brown and they're very resinous. They're 3/4 of an inch long and they're just like very sticky. The bark is heavily furrowed once it gets older, with really defined ridges. They almost kind of look like oak to me once they get really big. And then the growth form is they grow straight up and then they spread out near the top. And the other thing that Jake and Alex kind of came to me with for an ID while out in the field is they tend to the buds tend to grow upward. So they'll like curve up. Which once they said that going out in the field kind of stuck and I was like, that makes sense. Especially with the big sharp buds at the end.
they look like witches' fingers. They have like tons. All the like nodes are just like knuckles, and they're like skinny with the little like bud at the end. That's what we think of.
So this is what the male flowers look like, and you can kind of assume this is what the balsam poplar looks like too. Because they're bright red, and they are also growing right now. I noticed them yesterday when I was in Newport. So these ones were taken both by the Intervale crew in April. That one was taken on April 17th, and this one was taken on April 29th. So this seems on par for what we're seeing right now in the kingdom. And then the female flowers, again, are yellow. They're bright, like lime greenish yellow. And those we start seeing kind of that first week of May is when we really start seeing them. And they're kind of like that lightish yellow flower, honestly. This was taken in Hardwick last year on May 10th. So that kind of gives you a good sense of what we would see here in the NEK. And then as those pods start forming, they also become very large pods. These ones, when you cut them off the tree, they make a really nice thunk on the ground. It's very satisfying. But they also, like all of the other Salicaceae species that we were talking about, when we go to collect them, this is kind of the good time for us to be collecting when they're starting to break apart and spread out fluff, but not every pod is fully opening up. And then black willow. This is our last species for the spring. And it is also dioecious, male and female. It's wind dispersed and also is happening around mid-June. So we have like clusters of seed collection happening all throughout the spring. This photo was taken at the end of May last year, and you can see that the pods were already forming. They weren't quite ready, but gives you a good timeline. And so the leaves are long and slender. They are sharply toothed. They are green below, and they have persistent stipules that stay on. So that's like one of the best characteristics to identify this species. Their buds are really short and oval, which is kind of unique with a lot of the other willow species. Most of the willow species are long and narrow, and they like are really pressed against the twig. And the other thing is that the scale edges are overlapping rather than fused. So you'll see like the scale edge on these. The bark is shaggy. As it matures, it cracks into loose plates. And then another characteristic is that the branches are brittle. So if you go to pull it down, it'll break right off. But they're still pliable. So you can like bend the twigs around. And then they also are multi-trunked, and they grow along rivers and they're like shrubby on lake shores. So, yeah, it's your turn, Jake.
Cool. Hey, give you a break for talking for a second. So these are some of our site selection considerations. This is Big Falls. Is this Big Falls?
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. We can see here this great like silver maple forest right along a river. We can see, I mean, just in this open, we'll get into it, but right in this open shot, we can see a lot of like low branches, this like nice open forest, pretty easily accessible, and easy to access for us. There was a road nearby. So the first thing we do is we request land access for any scouting or collection activities. We have this license to collect on state lands, so things like state parks or wildlife management areas. And otherwise, we'll ask for access if we're on like a private landowner's property. We've collected on like agricultural, like farms before and stuff, or on like TNC land. We also work with. So yeah, we have to make sure that we're getting the proper authorization to be wherever we are. So these are our good site characteristics. The first and foremost is accessible. In all senses of the word. We don't like to move too far from the truck if we can help it, because oftentimes we're carrying these like giant buckets of stuff like acorns, or we don't want to be hiking mountains to carry acorns. I've done that before and it's not that much fun. Near waterways for canoe and kayaking. We just the other day, Clara from the Essex County Conservation District and I went for a nice canoe down the Clyde to look for some silver maple sites. So as long as it's accessible in some way of getting there or another. And then stable ground. If it's something like a cedar swamp we're in, or like some other, for example, like a wetland or like a super sensitive habitat, we're probably not going to want to be in there. It's just hard to get around, and it's probably not worth it for destroying the sensitive ecosystem. And also kind of along with accessibility, like, is it accessible to us as 5 foot something people? So we're looking at branches that are like lower than 25 feet. Again, a lot of those like silver maples you can see in the background here are like have lots of like drooping branches that are great. And it also helps. We also like things that are in fields, because they tend to have a lot of like low growing branches because the sun hits them. When it's like the middle of a forest, it's kind of hard. A lot of trees kind of grow straight up and then out, like a huge crown and not a lot underneath. So that's also something we look for. And then groupings of the same species. It's great. Again, this silver maple forest in the background, we can go there. We know we're going to get a kind of silver maple, all in the same site. We're not just like hounding the same tree over and over again. And then individuals that produce a lot of seed. We're looking for like really like loaded down individuals, ideally, or like a group of individuals that are pretty good. And that'll just make sure we're not over collecting or anything. If there's only a few seeds on the tree, it's probably not worth the hour drive in NEK to get to wherever we're going to collect from. So
I will want to add, like, not only heavy buckets, but like basically when we go out collecting, we are carrying all of that stuff on that table with us. We usually have the eye stick pictured on this table with the camera so that we can send it up and see if we have fluffing happening or if the seeds at the top of the tree are as far along as at the bottom, things like that. So lots of equipment that we're trying to call out with us at the same time. So
Ladders.
ladders,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that's another caveat of wanting to be near the truck as well. We also use the trucks a lot of times. If we have access, we can just like back the truck up and be in the bed of the truck, to be collecting aqua branches and things like that. So
Oh, and I also forget to mention we have a new little toy called a Big Shot Slingshot that Justice ordered. Just want to talk about the slingshot.
I mean, it's over there.
Yeah,
It's in the case. We will ideally be using it to help shake branches near the top of the trees so that we can shake down some pods or some auras or stuff like that. I've used it in the past for another job where we sent up like a chainsaw, one of those hand-held chainsaws, so you could cut a branch that's way up in the canopy. So we may try to use that as well. But it's basically just two fiberglass poles that you connect together, and then you got a huge slingshot attachment that you put at the top, and then you just like pull it back, and you're able to. It comes with weights and ropes, so you attach the rope and the weight together and send it over a branch. So
Oh yeah, sure. So this is a great site. This is a TNC site down in Maidstone Bends. And this is, you can see there's just like a row of silver maples along the field. Actually, the whole field, it like dips in. The whole field is like edge is covered with them. And these are really great individuals. You can see here the difference in coloration between the leaves and the seeds. So this is like a really loaded tree, and they were all like that, which was really great. And we can literally like drive right up to it and just, yeah, like Jess said, back the truck up. We don't even need to bring a ladder out in that case. But we still will if you need to. But yeah, this is a great site. This is, again, we got landowner permission. Well, we got TNC permission to access this site, and we've been going there for a few years, and it's a super great site right along the Connecticut.
again, collection end of May.
Yep. I actually don't know where this is.
This is in
Oh, in
Cornwall.
Cornwall. Both sides of the access road and silver maples with low branches. We're able to collect and drive along and collect with ease. Yeah, I mean, again, if you can take the truck as close as you can with you. This also, the back of the truck also serves as like a really great, you can see things like Samaras being caught on the truck bed, so they're not just getting like lost in the grass. I mean, I guess it is good if they get lost in the grass, but not in the hayfields or in the road or anything.
We were cutting off little limbs as we were driving along this road, and we were just putting them in the bed of the truck. And we were like, we will process these once we're done. So the truck bed served as our vestibule for all of our seats while we were clipping. So
this is a site that Jess and Alex got to go to a few years ago. This was at Party Beach in the campground. This tree is sadly no longer there. But it was really great. You can see it's like super low to the ground. Like just some of the trees some of the branches are just right up against this like trailer height, like truck height. And it just extends upwards, and it was super loaded, and it was level ground because it was a campsite. We obviously got campsite permission to be in there. And yeah, super easy to set up a ladder, lots of low branches, tons of like loaded branches. Really great site. And again, like right off the road, like we could drive right up to it. This was their haul. 18.5 gallons in 3.5 hours, and it did not even scrape the surface of the tree.
we could have spent more time.
Yeah. Yeah, great tree. Yeah, and you can see here all of these like huge pods. This gives you the Alex, for comparison. Gives you a great like example of seeing like how big these pods are. And again, each one will have like hundreds of seeds. So like 18.5 gallons of this will, when we lay it out on the screens, will expand up, and it'll be really great. Tons and tons of seeds off this tree. But we also like to we want a caveat here. We like to get seeds from a lot of trees so that there's enough genetic diversity, and it's not just all relying on the same genetics for one species.
We did know that this tree was going to be cut, so that was part of the other reason why we were collecting so much off of it. Or like, we're not going to get any more genetics out of this one tree.
Mhm.
So we kind of went to town on it.
And areas where we can stabilize ladders, reaching behind the canopy. Again, we don't really want those like wet, swampy areas. I mean, they're fine if it's, like a cedar swamp maybe, and there's things low to the ground. But if we can help it, we'd like to bring out our ladder and our like 10-foot full pruners. And that'll just give us the best chance of getting as much as we can. And then areas where we can use boats to access. This is Westmore. Is this this is Center Pond, Job's Pond, right? Yes. Jess wasn't even there that day and she remembers it better than I do. Yeah, where just the whole like side of the whole every edge of the lake was covered with cedars, and it was a super great year for seekers back in 2023. So we were able to just canoe along, collect as we go. Super nice, super good day. Not on the water.
As you can see, the canoe is just filled with sprigs.
Yeah, we were just clipping them as we went. It was a good day, and again, easy to like just like pull yourself along kind of along the cedars. So yeah, we didn't even need to clip that much. A lot of it was just kind of like grabbing it off the branches, which was great.
All right. So collection considerations and techniques. So as I pointed out, most of our equipment is around the room right now, but our general toolkit that we bring any day that we were out scouting is our 5-gallon or 3.5-gallon buckets. We take paper bags. This year we will be bringing our slingshot. Muck boots are always a must for us just because we are riparian lands. We're in the water most of the time. We usually bring our extendable pole pruners. We always have our binoculars. We usually have at least 1 or 2 hand pruners. Those tend to be helpful once we have branches off the tree and we're just clipping pods off the branches or smars off the branches or whatever we are collecting that day. We also have these pouches, which you can see on that blue bucket over there. We tend to put our 3.5-gallon buckets inside the pouches and then we wear them so that both of our hands are free. And we can just collect and process right into the bucket. And then we generally have a ladder that we are carrying around as well. So this is our general toolkit. Some general protocols. We try to sample equally and randomly across the extent of the population. So if we have like that Maidstone Bends site that just spans a whole, like, I don't know, that's probably like 20 acres of land. We are just kind of collecting a little bit off each tree as we go. We generally are trying not to collect more than 20% of the seed available at any site during the day of collection. And so if there are other groups that are collecting seed that you know of, you want to make sure that you're communicating with them so that you're not collecting multiple times off of the same site and everybody's collecting 20%. The reason for our 20% is so that there's still plenty for regeneration and there's still plenty for wildlife. We're not trying to take away all the food. And then we also are trying to maintain detailed records. So we're keeping track of the species that are collected, the date of collection, how many individuals we've collected from, the location, the seed zone, how much we collected in volume in gallons, and then how long it took you to collect. So all of this is not only just good for us to be keeping track of for future information, it helps us with grant writing and all of that stuff as well. But most of this we keep track of on we have iPads that are connected to our field map, which is the one that we showed before. And all of this information is kept within that map as well. So one of our techniques is hand collection. Sometimes we're able to collect from the bed of the truck, like I mentioned. And that allows us to have multiple people at an elevated position at the same time collecting off the same tree. Otherwise, we have a ladder. One person's holding the ladder. One person's on the ladder collecting. And that's kind of the way that system works out. Right here, they're collecting quaking aspen and that was on May 17th of 2023. And so here's another example. This is a really great site. It was very large. There was a lot of silver maples. We had a large group out this day. This is when we had UVM students with us, and I think there was like 12 of them out with us, and it was the 12 students, the teacher, Jake, me, Alex, Brooke. So there was a good group of us out there, and this was a great site just because there were so many trees. We could all spread out. We could all be doing the same exact thing. We had multiple ladders. We had multiple pruners. Everybody was just kind of grabbing off the trees. So when we're thinking of if we're having groups coming out with us, we're trying to find sites that are like this. Yeah. And then I mentioned pole pruners. We always carry our extendable pole pruner with us. And like I said, we generally have a ladder. So we'll send one person up on the ladder, one person's holding the ladder, and the person on the ladder can either be collecting straight off the tree or using a pole pruner to drop seeds for another person on the ground to be collecting. So.
And we try not to be clipping too like haphazardly.
Yeah.
If it's like really a stretch, sometimes we might clip like a big branch, or we might use a saw to get like a big branch down if it's like really, really loaded, and then we might leave the tree alone other than that. But we try to hand collect if we can, and then if we need to cut down a branch, we'll try to be really like strategic with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Mm.
And I mentioned before having little hangers. This is one of the reasons why. We will have a nice long branch full of pods, and instead of like stripping the branch itself, which could damage all the pods and the seeds inside, we tend to use little clippers and just clip the pods off of the branch. Yeah. Sometimes we do fell trees. We've done it in the past for several of our Salicaceae species. The first time that we did it was at a fish hatchery, and the tree was already slated to be cut down. So we're like, can we time it with our seeds? And they were like, yes, of course. And so we did. We had one of the Fish and Wildlife guys there to swear the tree down. And then we just spent all day collecting all of the seeds that we could. A lot of them had dispersed in the fall. So it wasn't as much as we had hoped, but it worked. This one was a smaller cottonwood that was at, this is Willoughby Falls.
Yeah, this is Willoughby Falls. I was out there this day with a couple like Vermont Fish and Wildlife techs, and we were kind of like, it was a field that was filled with these kind of like huge little stands of cottonwood like all throughout the field. And we were able to, this was kind of at the end of collection. We were trying to get a little bit of extra for the season. And we were picking like some trees that were still holding on to their fluff. You can see some of it starting to go there. And yeah, we were just kind of carefully selecting a few. We only cut down, I think, 3 the whole day out of the whole like giant stand. So we try to be, again, like really careful with this because we'd like to come back to it. And we like it to be there for the rest of the stuff. But we felt like this was a site that kind of warranted it in a time that kind of warranted it. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's especially like Jake said, if we cut down the tree, we can't use that tree ever again. So we don't like this method, but we will use it sparingly. And then this is from 2022. We actually haven't done much of this method recently, although I think Brooke is going to try to do some tarping this year. We have tarped for silver maple. We tried shaking the tree to see if we could get the branches down. And it kind of worked. We were right next to that backwater, and most of the seeds just went into the water. So it didn't work as great as we had hoped, but we have used tarps. We used them for felling some trees before too. It was after the first tree that we felled. Most of our seeds had dispersed. We were like, what if we put a tarp down? Aim for the tarp. And that kind of worked as well. And then we usually use boats. We often are in canoes, but this day, this was in 2022, Fish and Wildlife joined us. They had their John boat. And so we sent them out on this backwater, and they were just out here with big nets scooping up silver maples off the water. So any way that we can use boats is a good day.
And these are some of our seed processing techniques for certain species. You might recognize this structure that's sitting over there on the table. This is our tornado method. This is how we clean a lot of our like spring species, our like fluffy aspens and cottonwoods and balsam poplars and tribulus. And yeah, and this was taken on 5/18/2023. So it had probably been within the week. We had collected some quaking aspen right before it was about to fluff, laid it down on the screen to dry out and fluff up. Once it was fluffed up, we were able to kind of drop it into our system. And you'll see how it works in a few slides, but cool system, cool setup. So propagating from seed can be difficult if the seed is hard to clean or like somehow store in a sustainable way. It kind of ranges, and a lot of things that we take into consideration, like whether it requires like dormancy, like our basswood, or if it has like a super thick seed coat like the basswood. Basswood's a tough one. But we're kind of in for the spring. We're kind of in this general area, this like easy to somewhat easy range where we don't need specialized. Well, we do need. Well, we kind of create our own machines. We don't need like expensive specialized machines like we might for the like alder or the birch. But we kind of make our own stuff. A lot of the like maples and silver maple, like red maples and silver maples and elms, don't require a ton of cleaning. We kind of just let them out to dry, and then once they're at a good hydration method, we put them in the fridge for a while, and then we have cleaning required, which is what we do with our like aspens and poplars, and that just means some amount of cleaning goes into it. We can't just like kind of leave it out to dry and then stuff it away. We have to get down. A lot of the like biomass that accumulates is like fluff. So when we were originally storing seeds in fluff, like our quaking aspen seeds, and it was just creating these like pillows in the cooler that were just like sucking up space. But once we started cleaning them down, we were able to condense it down in a much better for the seeds way, where they're not at risk of becoming like moldy from any hydration left in the fluff. And it was just way easier to store and way easier to count, way easier to measure.
I will say that even though we were storing them in the fluff and like everything Jake said is a consideration, our germination rates were still fairly high from stuff that was stored as fluff. It was just very difficult to use after pulling from a fridge. So like we use a hydro seeder for our direct seeding projects, and like the fluff does not go into the seeder, the hydro seeder, very well. It'll just like clog it up and everything. So we're trying to figure out a way to process it so it wasn't doing that. And also, like you said, it takes up a lot of space. So, yeah.
Thank you for the clarifications. These are our easy processing. Once these are collected, we typically dry them down on screens with fans circulating. We'll have like it seems like kind of an energy suck, but it really is like a good use of time. We have like fans going all the time in the spring to help like dry down these species for like a couple of days before transporting them. We have a few kind of sites that we use, or a few like end destinations we use. Either we have fridges and freezers down at in St. Johnsbury at a Vermont Fish and Wildlife kind of annex area. And then they also have huge tree coolers at the Intervale Center that we also utilize if we're working with Brooke, or if we want to send her away with some stuff. This is what they look like. This is what these are quaking aspen pods. So this is kind of what they look like after they're like freshly harvested. You can see that they're not even really like showing that much fluff at all. But we know that they're fluffing because they were fluffing on the tree a little bit. So we're gonna place them really far apart on all of these so that they have space to expand, and so that the air can circulate around them really well and get them to kind of initiate the fluffing process. And this is what it looks like after just a few days. This is, again, the last one was quaking aspen. This is quaking aspen. You can see how much it's fluffed out in a couple days. They fully open and the screens will be like caked in fluff. And again, they're condensed, they're sandwiched in screens so that they don't just fly everywhere. That's super, super light material that'll just fly everywhere, especially with all the fans going. So
It still gets heavier.
it still gets everywhere. We have to vacuum up the facility so good after every time. And then at this point, we use our tornado cleaning method to process the fluff. And it's a dog water kind of bowl container that we makeshifted. So we use a air compressor, which you'll see in a minute. And we put it into this like hole at the top. And we kind of are trying to force the seeds through these sieves and trying to catch as much biomass as we can and remove that from the system. So we generally end up with like the top layer being this kind of like matted fluff, and then down there's maybe some seeds and some like bigger debris, and then there's like all seeds on the bottom. And we'll see that in a minute. Here is our Alex. Alex did a great job of making these awesome drawings of how we do everything. We're again just trying to remove as much biomass as possible, again to help like not take up space and to not clog our machines. And we tweak them every year. It's actually a little bit different for every species. You can see that Alex has these labeled. Oh, this is just a general guide.
Yeah.
But Alex has these labeled of the different screens that we have, and then a collection pan at the bottom, and every seed is different. It's a different size, so we have different screens for different species, kind of. So we tweak it a little bit every time.
We learn more and more every year.
Yeah, every time we do it, we find a better method, so that's a good sign, I think. And this is, you can see it in action. That's Gabby Fuguaker from the Florida Bar Show Association. This is at our Vermont Fish and Wildlife Facility. And then we're sending it directly into this bucket here, but that's just because that's what fits on our screens that we have here. But also we have these smaller like metal screens that have their own like condensed pan.
Yeah, these ones are the cottonwood. So we end up having to use we have a dead bake seed cleaner, which is more for our bigger, like fleshy species, like our chokecherry and our dogwoods and stuff. But the screens work really well for the cottonwoods. So that's another reason why we're using buckets with the green screens instead of our metal screens out there.
Yeah, make sure you have really good ventilation for this if you plan on doing it yourself, because it's really, really tough. It's just all like super like fiberglassy particulate matter that gets all up in the air. But we have a lot of ventilation when we do it, and we use our masks, and we're very safe. That's our PPE. And we use ear protection because we're running the air compressors for like 8 hours straight. And then this is what it looks like at the end of it. So you can see, I mean, you saw at the first slide, all of the, pods that fluffed out into this huge kind of pillow of fluffy materials, and then it all condenses down to this. This is maybe like a couple screens worth of fluff, or a couple screens worth of seeds. And so this is the end result. This is our like bottom pan. So there might be some in like top pans that we like separated out even further. But yeah, we get this super clean product with like only like relatively mild like debris or like abnormalities or whatever. So we get it like as really as clean as we can, and this also helps us measure. So we're able to like count out, say, 100 seeds, get like an average weight of the collection, and then we're able to then better judge how many we have in our collection, how many we can put out at a site. Yeah.
I think this might be it. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So number one, this is very cool, and this is a very cool presentation. Number two, when you're moving the seeds, like, okay, so the pods are on the screens, and then they fluff out, and then you're moving the fluff into your container. How do you do that transfer? And like, because you're leaving the pods probably on the screens do you do anything with the pods? How does that transfer work?
So I think it's changed over the years.
It
Because when we first were starting to do this, we were using a shop vac with like the fluff on the end of the hose and like pulling up the fluff through the screen. And then we would just like pull out the flock and put it into that system and then do the whole tornado method. And then I think was it 2023 or 2024?
I think it was like late 2023.
Okay. So these two, Jake and Alex, they were like, you don't need to do that. We could just put the pots right into that system. And it takes a little bit more time initially, but like it was a lot of time with a shop vac just trying to pull out all the fluff that way. And it seemed like they were getting more seeds out of it with that method. I don't know if you want to talk more
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, totally. Yeah, we found it was just like a better way because by the time with the way that because we dry everything so like intensely, the like pods themselves kind of just like crumble into dust when we would grab them. So we were able to just kind of like crunch them up while we put them in our little container. And we were just doing it, yeah, like pods and all. We ended up with a little bit more debris, but again, we were getting like tons more seeds. We weren't like wasting any, leaving them in the pods. So that was super helpful. And then we also found that the shop vac method was kind of like like turning the fluff into cotton balls, which was kind of preventing us from doing the air compressor like separation. So we ended up just mixing that entirely, and we kind of just were just grabbing pods and chucking them in the container and just going from there, and it ended up working out really well. Yeah, especially sometimes it's hard. I think shrub willow like will tend to dry out a little bit better than maybe like the cottonwood pods just because they're smaller and less like material, but we put everything in there. Yeah, everything in the kitchen sink. So yeah. Mm.
Everything.
On years, like, if we're comparing seasons, right, from last year to this year, like, how do the conditions of, like the weather and everything this year compared to last year, and like how is that affecting your timelines this year, for collections and scouting and all of that?
I think so. I've been kind of tracking phenology since 2021. I would say like late season 2021 is when I really started like watching things because I was like, oh, I know like this is what happens this past year. I need to kind of step up my game. And 2022 really had the effort of Rob and Rona, who were my crew members. We were all out really scouting. So I feel like for the most part, the years haven't shifted too drastically for species. So like if I pulled up our calendar right now, I could be like, this is generally the week that we'll be doing silver maple. This is generally the week that we'll be doing balsam poplar. Um, and it shifts only like a little bit one way or another. I will say like last year, the silver maples went like a week early. So like Brooke over in Burlington, she went out to do collection and she was like, everything's already on the ground. Thankfully, we are about a week behind Burlington. And so she gave us like the notice that we needed to kind of swap focus from elms. We were like, we need to get ourselves silver maple. And so, like I said, the silver maple generally is going that first weekend in June. And this past year is Memorial Day weekend. And so it was just like, that was a big shift. I feel like most of the other species, we haven't seen that big of a shift yet. I think this year with the winter, things are a little bit delayed compared to last year, but not by much. At least that's my feeling right now.
That's what it seems like.
Like the photos that we've taken compared to last year, they don't seem much different. So, we'll see how the season goes. We're coming into it now. This is cool.
And Jess has been doing a great job over the last like 4 years of tracking like every detail of every day, like weather conditions and all kinds of stuff to keep track of stuff like that and notice any changes. And yeah, it stayed pretty constant throughout the years, which has been great.
Yeah.
Like get to have the information.
Harry, did you have a question?
Yeah, so you're putting your observations into iNaturalist, but are you using that internally as well? Like, is iNaturalist robust enough for you to, or do you have an internal tracking system?
So the iNaturalist link that's something that we're trying to build out with the Riparian and Native Seed partnership. So our partnership with the Inner Vale Center and all of our other partners. We've had it Like we asked Vermont Center for Eco Studies to build that out for us so that we could utilize it because we realized there's a lot of citizen scientists who are out there that we could be asking for help. Um, it's not something that we have necessarily relied on up to this point. We're trying to get folks more used to inputting like phenology data, which would help us as we're looking through points. So like the last few years, we've really been using our internal scouting map, which is the one that we had showed before. But it is something that we're trying to build out more and get more people aware of so that we can use it a little bit more. So
I was just wondering, are you some of the only people collecting seeds in the kingdom?
um unless there's somebody who hasn't spoken up, yes. Yes. Yeah, it seems like for like dedicated seed collection efforts, especially for tree and shrubs, it's really just us. And then on the other side of the state, the Intervale Center has a crew that's running as well. And so we collaborate all the time. But um I know that there are folks who are doing like herbaceous seed collection. But we don't tend to have as much of overlap. Just knows we're doing woody species. Yeah. Bill, I saw your hand up. You have a question?
Yes. Yes, Bear. I think it's great for doing this. Also do you see NorthWoods' role in the whole, erosion control, conservation science, say, 10 years from now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a big need for seed, regionally. And there's a lot of interest in species in peril. So there are species like uh, the elms and the ashes and hemlock that are all species that folks are wanting to preserve because they're being defoliated or infected with diseases and all of that. So ideally, I would like to see us kind of moving towards helping in those ways as well. If we can get the direct seeding trials to work, we could see this as being pretty standard across the state for restoration efforts. It could be another tool in our tool belt to restoring areas that have been damaged by disasters or old ag fields that are being put into riparian restoration efforts and things like that. Um, so those are some of the things that I'm thinking about that I'm hoping.
On the conservation district side, so we're in Essex, we're trying to decide, is this financially something that, in much of the we might want to do it for the world and that area? Can we compete with Internet? Can we compete with other places? How does the funding for all of this work?
Yeah, so we've been very lucky to have had support by the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission for the last few years. Um, we are coming up into we're trying to figure out how to make this financial, the stability more of a thing. If we don't have GLFC funding. So we have some funding coming through One Hive, which is a foundation that focuses on pollinator habitat. So some of our seed collection efforts could be going towards that avenue. We also have, like I said, the species of interest for conservation need. So there are like many avenues of doing seed collection. We have been focusing pretty solely on riparian restoration efforts because of our funding with Vermont Fish and Wildlife and Great Lakes Fishery Commission. Um, yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but
Yeah,
you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, regarding sort of citizen scientist scouting and as regard to invasive species and the vulnerabilities of some tree species. Have y'all connected with Haiti Invasives and the work that they do? Because they do an invasives training.
Mm-hmm. We haven't. Yeah, Neil, that's a great idea.
Yeah, because they train, I think,
like I think there were 60 people in my class for VTM basis, and I think they do 2 trainings in a year, and then they've been doing it for multiple years, and that's eyes in the trees, you know.
Mhm.
I don't know if those volunteers would be able to give you the phenology data that you're looking for, but you're throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, honestly, like as many eyes looking around is great. So yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. We thread up with partnerships. Yeah, blow the better.
Please give me more partnerships.
Yeah, totally.
I have her contact. I'll let you know.
Great, cool.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, what is that in that picture?
This one? Pretty. It's a black ash. It's a nail flower. Yeah, we couldn't quite swing it into our presentation because it's not a spring collection, but they are flowering in the spring, which is really pretty. Yeah.
You might see these right now.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, great boss. Yeah. Cool. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I wanted to say thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure having y'all. If you haven't already signed the sign-in sheet on the back table, it'd be great for you all to sign in just so that we have numbers of who showed up and everything. And feel free to take a look around at all of the equipment. And like Vic said, we have all these specimens over here. So if you didn't get a chance to look at them, please do it.